You actually are an expert on China, right?
Correct. Personally, I think it's hard to compare what's going on right now in U.S.-China competition with the Cold War because China is so much more integrated in the global economy than the Soviet Union ever was. So I understand the analogy, but I think there are some problems with it historically because there were really two bifurcated economic systems in the Cold War that operated under very different circumstances, and that's not the world we live in today.
April Herlevi is a senior research scientist at CNA and a non-resident fellow at the National Bureau of Asian Research. She specializes in China's political economy and foreign economic policy, helping policymakers and scholars understand global trends in economic statecraft.
We should have actually recognized the role that subsidies play in the innovation ecosystem in China much sooner than we did. So to your point, we're now playing catch up.
Without banning it, we have no shot at having it consumer DJI.
I worry in that particular case might be too late.
As an entrepreneur, what am I supposed to do?
All right, April. So welcome to the #1 defense tech industry podcast. We mostly spray every guest with the aloe mag spray to start, but I'll spare you.
But it's a beautiful scent. I like it.
It gets me in the right state of mind to talk defense. But you actually are an expert on China, right?
Correct.
And how does one become an expert on China?
Many, many years of study is what I will say. So I had kind of a funny story. So my undergrad was sort of political science and economics. I knew I wanted to do something international, but I didn't have a focus at that time in my career. And it wasn't until my master's program, I actually basically did a summer study abroad course in China. And everything I had read and learned about China was not what I saw on the ground in China. And I thought, that's just too fascinating to pass up. So I actually, at that point, kind of changed my career trajectory and started focusing solely on China. Started learning the language. Eventually did a Ph.D. In Chinese comparative politics and foreign affairs at the University of Virginia. And then found a job at CNA.
All right, nice. And as Trump would say, China. Or I can't even do the Trump voice, but I want to. I wish I could do it. China. I'm going to do tariffs on China. So wait, what's going on with the tariffs? Are we doing it?
Oh, the tit for tat. It's already begun, yes.
Yeah.
And I haven't been following it because I still have nightmares from the first Trump administration of just trying to keep up every day. There was a time where I felt like I could actually keep up to date on what was going on in U.S.-China relations. Right now, it is nearly impossible. There's just too much activity and too many topics to stay up on. So it's actually more challenging.
I think the #1 topic everyone's talking about is DeepSeek, probably the
that
AI
is hot.
model. That's hot. That's hot. I like that. It's a hot topic. Yeah, I mean, what are we doing about it?
Oh, when you say we who do
the
you
country.
mean? The country?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, AI development, a lot of it's open source, so everyone has access to the code. So I think it could be a problem in terms of their models getting ahead, but it's also an opportunity. Let's see what they're doing. I'm not an AI expert in terms of the actual algorithms and the mechanics behind it, but I know we have a great ecosystem. So in that sense, I hope they're digging into DeepSeek.
The competition's going.
Exactly.
It's fierce right now. Yeah, I'm not an AI expert. I make an AI gun, but I'm not an AI expert either. I'm mostly a media star. Yeah,
yes.
So that's what we talk about. Okay, so let's take a step back. So China became an expert. What's your favorite dynasty?
Ooh.
Ming Dynasty? Han Dynasty?
No, I love Song Dynasty poetry.
Whoa,
so
okay.
maybe,
Why? Wait, talk about that.
Well, poetry in general, classical Chinese was one of those things when you're actually learning Chinese, once you get to an advanced enough level, they'll start throwing the classics at you. But that's really hard because it's all illusion and allegory and what they call chengyu. So these phrases that they mean one thing in sort of concrete terms, but they are alluding to a broader concept. And I find that stuff so fascinating and still challenging. For me to read classical Chinese is incredibly challenging, so I sort of force myself to do it. But I do love the poetry of China.
Okay, this is going to make me sound dumb, but so there's classical Chinese as like a language, and then Mandarin is a different...
Well,
how does it work?
It's the script. Much of how the characters have evolved over time has changed. And then so... In some sense, the characters that are in classical Chinese are just, I think, more difficult to read. And because the context, Chinese is a very contextual language. So you have to read a whole paragraph to really understand maybe one sentence in that paragraph. You can't just sort of take stuff out of context. And that's very challenging. But then as those characters have evolved, which you might have heard of people differentiate between traditional characters and standard Mandarin. So traditional characters are closer to their historic sort of classical roots, and that's what's still used in Hong Kong and in Taiwan. But I can't remember when, I think it was the 1960s, there was basically a linguistics professor in China that said, we need to simplify these characters for like the average person to increase literacy rates. So they did that. They went through all the characters and basically standardized them and made them simplified. And for language learners like myself in the United States, you typically learn simplified characters. That's what you start with.
Okay.
You can see the connections between the sort of traditional characters and the simplified characters. But one of the things I've been trying to do personally is go back and actually learn the traditional characters, because that's how you read primary source documents from Taiwan.
That makes sense. Okay. And reading primary source documents from Taiwan is probably important right now, or?
I think so. Yeah. We've actually done some work recently at CNA on basically Taiwan lessons learned from the Russia-Ukraine war. Obviously for Taiwan, their biggest potential threat is China and the People's Liberation Army. So they're thinking very seriously about how do we prepare for a potential attack by mainland China.
Wait, so Taiwan does not want to be a part of China?
Oh, there's a great question. So very complicated. Depends on who you ask. There are probably segments of the population that still believe culturally they are part of Greater China, but there is increasingly segments of society that think they have a unique Taiwanese identity. And I think that's the biggest problem facing China's policy towards Taiwan. So they still kind of have their, what I'd say, Cold War or post-World War II policy that it's part of the, the mainland Greater China, and they're not willing to acknowledge that Taiwan itself has changed tremendously over the past 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And that creates a significant challenge for the leadership in Beijing.
What was it like the 1700s when they split? When would take it back to the beginning?
And this is where I'm not the expert in terms of the history, because there is debates. What I'll say is that within.
Well, guess what? On the podcast, you're an expert. You're an expert. You just go with it. We'll fact check it later. Whatever.
Perfect. Well, as long as we're fact checking. Yeah. No, I mean, but there's always been a debate of, is Taiwan part of China or not? Mm-hmm. And historians disagree. I mean, there's an indigenous population on Taiwan that was sort of always separate, but there's been multiple waves of populations from mainland China that have moved to Taiwan over the centuries. That's kind of what you're referring to in the 1700s. People were moving there that were from the mainland. So there's always been these connections between the two places. But at the end of the day, was that sovereignty? And then you asked a question about the dynasties. You get to the Qing dynasty, and when the Qing dynasty sort of started to fall apart, there really wasn't control. So they lost a war to Japan.
Yeah, I read something about how there was and I think it was that dynasty, there was a bunch of land on the border of mainland China that's close to Taiwan that they scorched earth. You know what I'm talking about?
Not specifically. They just weren't as focused on that. So the other thing that happened that was really important, though, is they lost a war to Japan. And so Japan de facto, was on the Korean Peninsula and de facto took over control of Taiwan. And so that's a point of contention in modern Chinese debates, is their argument is Japan should have never taken that territory. The problem is the Taiwans actually think Japan did a lot of good things in Taiwan, and they have very fond memories of Japan, unlike in Korea, which that's a whole separate topic there.
Okay. So wait, you said the Song dynasty?
Well, I just like their poetry.
Yeah, no, let's go. I want to get back. We got to come back to that. We can't go away. Taiwan, a lot of the listeners are probably interested in the U.S.-Taiwan or the China-Taiwan relationship. That's more defense related. Yeah, this is a defense podcast, but I'm a poetry guy.
Okay.
So so we got the poetry there. When was this dynasty?
I know,
roughly?
actually, this will have to, I need a fact check.
Hey, pull it up.
Pull it up, because I don't remember the exact years.
Yeah. You don't have to look. The internet allows us to be able to keep this tab open. Then we're going to come back to the Tibetan monks. We have to talk about that.
Is it song like SONG?
SONG. Yeah.
We need to get let's first pull this up on Wikipedia. We need to get the order of the dynasties.
Oh, there's a song.
Oh, here we go.
Find the YouTube video with the song. They're not Song Dynasty, but
a song about the dynasties. They
created a song someone tried to teach it to me a few years ago, that basically it's a mnemonic device to remember the order of all the dynasties. It's on YouTube.
Oh man, China's everywhere. I have a 2.5-year-old, and she's always wanting to watch these YouTube short videos, and I go look at the company, and it's some innocuous company that makes the video, and then it doesn't sound like a Chinese company. Yeah. But then you go look at who owns that company. It's China, and it's they're brainwashing my kids. They're everywhere. They got all the content.
If you want to, scorched earth campaign them, you can watch Peppa Pig. For a while, Peppa Pig
China
was banned in China because it was considered too Western, I guess. I don't remember the exact reasons.
Really?
It was considered against Chinese culture. So for a while it was banned, and I never really understood why, but
Do you actually, before we talk about Song Dynasty, just while we're talking about this, do you actually get into it at CNA, which is not a think tank, it's a research org, as we know, as everyone knows. Do you guys get into a little bit about that kind of stuff, like Chinese culture? Like, do we ban different products? Like, do you guys research that kind of stuff?
We research economic statecraft. We have a whole line of effort that looks at that sort of the export controls, tech competition, those sorts of topics. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Less so on the culture. But in the past, we have done work. And in ironies of my life, I actually, when I was still a government civilian, I actually had a contract to task CNA to do a study on basically the culture of the People's Liberation Army.
Yeah.
So CNA has done work in that realm, but we don't do historical. Although our vice president is actually a historian by training, so he's got extensive experience in sort of longer term history, which he loves to talk about.
Okay, yeah. I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, he's a historian by training.
Is that good?
I think it's a good thing.
It's
I
probably
think
good.
having that for China, definitely you have to have that context.
Yeah.
He's an expert on the People's Liberation Army, but it also, that goes to the Nationalist Army, the pre-Civil War. So like history is vitally important.
They care, and China cares about their history. Right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Did you see like when Putin was doing with Tucker, and he like spent like an hour about the history, and like 2 hours, like he was, and like he cared about it, and we're like, what is this guy talking about? Like,
They
bro.
love their history.
They're like, no, let me just take you back to the dawn of time, when Ukraine was actually all mine.
Yes, precisely.
That's pretty much his argument. I don't know. Something doesn't sit well with me. Maybe it's as like a modern technologist, like referencing like 500-year-old history as why you deserve something.
Well, to be clear, I always like to bring this up. So Mao wanted to get rid of all history. He said, we got to smash the four old. So ancient thinking, he wanted to get rid of that. Xi Jinping has tried to resurrect some of that. He's resurrected Confucius, other elements. And I think that's the idea that you just submit to the father figure. That's very Confucian. I think he likes that. So I think Chinese Communist Party leaders tend to be selective in what history they want to use when.
Yeah, that makes sense. So wait, he's trying to bring back Confucius and stuff.
Yeah.
Mao sounded like he was pretty smart.
Oh, well, I used to teach Chinese politics at the University of Virginia, and I always made all our students read basically Mao's early writings, sometimes his later writings, but like on guerrilla warfare, a lot of the things about, how to win hearts and minds, that was all Mao. I mean, if you read that stuff now, you could hear it in the last 20 years in the U.S. You'd hear U.S. military leaders, got to win hearts and minds. And I used to joke, I'm like, Mao already said all this. Like, go back and read your Mao, and you've got it.
Yeah. I mean, smart guy, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Song Dynasty was 960 to 1279, and it was I'm gonna scan this a little. Let's try Northern Song. Bianzhang, now Kaifeng. I'm going to say that
If
wrong.
you look at the map, too, this is probably why I like it so much. So I spent a lot of time, I used to live in Hangzhou, China, which is in the south. And so they still have a lot of monuments to some of these poets and other leaders from these dynasties.
So wait, you lived in, what city was that you lived in?
I lived in Hangzhou.
Okay, now that...
that is not on that map.
No, it's not on that map, but it is that. So it's more southern. What was it like?
It's south. It's like 2 hours south of Shanghai by bullet train.
What was it like?
It's beautiful. It's probably in my opinion, one of the most beautiful cities in China. Not that I've been to all of them, but it's considered a, quote, small town in Chinese standards, which means about 8 million people, which is...
Can we pull up a picture of the city skyline?
Oh, yeah. If you search Westlake, it's spelled Hangzhou.
Ngzhou.
Zhou. Mm-hmm.
I just guessed.
No, it's great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
That's Westlake. Yeah, so it's just beautiful. Oh, that's probably the river. So it's between a river and then there's this beautiful lake called Westlake where, again, going back to the poetry, poets would go sit on the edge of Westlake and write their beautiful poetry. And so if you walk around Westlake, it'll actually show different, monuments, and so poet sat here to compose this,
What's the city known for right now? Like, what's its industry?
It's getting into the tech space. I mean, this is actually now the headquarters to Alibaba.
Okay.
So this is where Jack Ma was originally from.
This is where they arrested him? Or no?
I don't think it's where...
Oh, okay.
I don't actually know where they arrested him. It's a blessing and a curse. I used to use...
Did they arrest him for being too awesome? I forget.
I think they thought he was amassing too much power, but he was also... The other reason I think he got targeted is... I think it was like about a decade ago. I'm actually writing a book manuscript, and I actually used his quote in it that says... The benefit of being in Hangzhou is being far away from Beijing. So, like, Jack Ma kind of flouted some of the leaders in Beijing, and got away with it for a long time. It eventually caught up with him, and so they were not happy about that. But this was also part of a broader tech crackdown that was going on at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just him that was targeted, but because he was so vocal and so, dismissive of leaders in Beijing, I think he kind of put himself in that position to get attacked, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah. He's back now, though, right?
He is back,
Okay.
yeah.
Actually, Jack, pull up. Have you ever seen like these like YouTube time lapses of like Chinese cities? They're so sick. Go like YouTube, like do like time lapse Hong Kong. Oh, on our Drone Ultimatum show, does it autoplay? That's hot. That's hot. I'm trying to bring back the Paris Hilton. That's hot.
Oh, that's hot.
That's hot.
Oh, very good. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I like it.
You can use that.
Hot topic.
That's hot topic. Like Chinese time lapse, like like Hong Kong city skyline time lapse. You haven't seen these before?
I think I maybe.
Hong Kong city time lapse skyline.
If not, I should have, because I'm obsessed with ghost cities in China.
Oh, we got to talk about ghost cities.
I used to live in one.
Here, let's go down. This is. I think try this.
I mean, the construction there
Time
during certain
lapse.
time periods was so incredible. And I mean, even I would go. There was a period of time where I was visiting China every year, and I would go to the same city, and it was like shock. It was like it was a different place. Like I would get lost because I'm like, this wasn't here last time. Where am I?
Oh, here we go. I think it's like.
I've seen the skyscraper.
No, I got it. Here we
Time-lapse,
go.
but-
Oh yeah, here. Okay, this is actually cool. Type actually, I think we got it right there. The mind blowing. Yeah, this thing. This actually work. This is good. This is not the exact one I was looking for, but okay, here we go. I think the audience needs to see this shit. Look at this. Now this is just one. I mean, how many cities do they have? They have a ton of cities.
A ton. Yeah.
This country is massive.
Well, and the cities are just massive and intense.
Whoa.
I mean, personally, I lived in Beijing for a while.
Can we make sure we pipe the music when we do the?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna pipe. I mean, that's just. I don't think people in our country have an appreciation for how staggering China is. I mean, we're talking.
Yeah.
This is massive.
Well, it's my comment about a small city. A small city. Everyone used to say, "Oh, you live in a small town in China, 8 million people. Hangzhou's not a small town." But in their context,
It's
it is
a small town. I mean, that's bigger than the DC metro area, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah.
Hold on. This is what we're up against here.
And the food there. Oh, Hong Kong.
Is it good?
Food,
The food in Hong Kong? I've never been to Hong
Well,
Kong.
the food everywhere. I still eat dumplings probably like 3 or 4 times a week. That's like my staple of my diet.
Like dim sum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man, dim sum is so good.
It is.
I mean, just look at this.
Yeah.
Think we can beat these guys?
Well, but the beautiful, so this actually brings back to why.
What do you guys think?
No, this is why I started studying China, though, is because I spent, a semester taking a class, and all we read about was the glittering skyline of Hong Kong and Shanghai. And I was like, I'm going to go see like the most massive economic growth I've ever seen. And then the summer I spent in China was in a rural part of a rural province. And the university I was at was having rolling brownouts. It was poor.
Yeah.
There was a lot of migrant workers.
You can cut it, Jack.
It was not this. And so for me, I was like, wait, where's the China I saw on all the posters? This is not the China I thought existed.
Are you saying it's like a facade?
No, I think there's just massive inequality. And
Okay.
so there is wealth, no question. And there is this beautiful cities, and it's so much fun, and there's a nightlife. But there's this underbelly that those videos don't show.
Yeah.
And there's the migrant labor force. There's the struggling economy. There's unemployment issues. There's environmental degradation. So I think you have to be aware of both.
Well, it's just a high growth with lots of change going on there. So you're gonna have a lot of that, right?
Exactly.
So ghost cities. Did you go through one of them?
Well, I lived in one for a while. So when I was in Hangzhou, I lived in one part of the city, but then my lease was up and I had to move. But I was only going to be in the city for a couple more months. And I was talking to a friend that was basically, she teaches foreigners, like foreign students, language programs. And she's like, wow, my university is running this language program. She's like, it's actually for Korean students. So it was Korean Chinese. But she's like, we have dorms available and they're really cheap. And I was a graduate student at the time doing my Ph.D. and I thought, hey, cheap's exactly what I'm looking for. So I say, this is perfect. I'm going to move there. I got my little 1-bedroom dorm. And it was literally nothing but skyscrapers. And the only thing there was that university, and it wasn't the full university. It was a satellite campus and nothing else. Like there was there was no restaurants. There was no one lived in any of those skyscrapers. So you'd walk around at night and there's these huge skyscrapers and it was just quiet and silent. And then half of them didn't get finished being built. So they were just sort of like empty facades of what could have been. And so, yeah, I lived there for 2 months because the rent was cheap.
I mean, that's eerie. Like it
was weird.
It's like
actually.
some I Am Legend shit.
Yes. That's how I felt. Oh, I have a great picture in one of the, whenever I give briefs, there's the slogan now from Xi Jinping is, the Chinese dream. And there was this half-built skyscraper with a bulldozer in front of it and a banner that said, Chinese dream, my dream. And it was just looked like this, awful construction site. And to me, that just kind of captured that, yeah, we're not quite there yet. They're trying to get the dream, but there's still some work.
What do you think is going to happen with all these ghost towns?
Most of them have already, either because of the real estate crisis, have already kind of gone under. And so unfortunately for the Chinese government, instead of sort of forcing companies to deal with this, they kind of let local officials get away with this. So those debt problems still exist. They haven't completely been written off. The cities themselves, though, you'll have the facade and probably nothing will happen with them. The money's already been lost. Some of the companies have gone under. Some of the other real estate companies haven't gone under yet, but they might.
Can they turn them into like some sort of like amusement park type thing? Like, or some.
Hey,
I don't know.
I mean, Chinese entrepreneurs are super creative. So if they could do something like that, I think
they turn into like a zombie apocalypse city. You could
exactly.
live in the zombie apocalypse.
Or like you can have like escape rooms. I mean, if they were creative, I'm not sure right now that kind of creativity is encouraged by the Chinese government. So I'm not sure that will happen. But if Chinese entrepreneurs were sort of left to go do whatever, then it could happen. Because I mean, they are very creative. I'll give
maybe
them that.
We'll do it. Yeah. We'll get over there. I'm sure they'll let us do business there, right?
That's a little different now. That has changed in the last 5 years for sure.
You think it has?
I do actually. I think it's starting to change. I think there was a period of time where I laugh because every year I would go talk to the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, in Shanghai and Beijing, and be like, what are business operations like? And despite every company going to the Chinese market, getting their intellectual property stolen, the next round of companies would be like, we're going to do it differently, though. And they're not going to steal our IP. And then they'd get their IP stolen. And you're like, are these companies ever going to learn? But what has been interesting, I think, post-pandemic is there does actually seem to be more genuine concern from U.S. businesses of, is this the future? Because a lot of businesses can't really access the Chinese market, which was always the big sell to go there. And if they can't do that, then there's less business case for setting up operations in China.
I mean, what is IP really? Who cares? Like, it's all about our moat is in brand and vibes. IP, bro. We don't care about any of that. I want China to try to steal this shit.
Okay,
can't steal
go
my vibe.
For it. That's true. You can't steal the vibe.
Can't steal the vibe. No, they do. They actually are notorious for like IP theft. That's their thing.
Yeah.
It's the embrace and extend.
Yeah.
Embrace what's been built and then try to extend. They never actually get to the extend part usually.
Well, it depends.
Well, in this case, they did on the drones.
Oh, well, I was like, for sure the drones.
They basically crushed us on this. But
what they did is, and this is where, again, I do say, like, Chinese entrepreneurs are fascinating because what they saw in the market was stuff like real estate, agriculture. Could you use drones for these things that at the time, I feel like in the U.S., we were still sort of thinking about drones in a much narrower context. And that is where companies like DJI really kind of got ahead. They're like, wow, there's a whole range of sectors that could potentially use those kind of quadcopters. And that was creative, just understanding that use case. And so I think that was one where that the ecosystem that exists in Shenzhen was good for that.
Shenzhen skyline.
Yeah.
Beautiful or something. Shenzhen skyline.
And
overview.
I like Shenzhen, but
it's not beautiful.
It's not beautiful.
But
yeah.
Video.
To your point
YouTube.
about vibe, I like the vibe there. The vibe is fun, but it's not I don't think it's one of the most beautiful cities.
Oh, here we go. Shenzhen. Here we go. No, it's not beautiful.
No.
But it's known as the world's factory, as you know.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. All right, skip ahead a little. Skip past this river part.
I know. The Greater Bay Area.
Oh. So yeah, here's.
I mean, it's not bad, but it's
okay.
not.
I mean, this is a place of work.
Yeah. This is to get
there's
business
actually
done.
DJI in the distance. You see the triangles?
Oh,
the
there we go.
the diamonds.
Yeah.
The diamonds was DJI. I've been studying the Shenzhen skyline.
Oh, have you? Good.
Oh yeah, of course. This is our
If you want to learn about Shenzhen, there's a good book it's called The Shenzhen Experiment.
I like how you say it versus how I say it.
Yeah.
You actually say it right. Shenzhen.
Well, don't worry.
Shenzhen.
When you live in China,
There it is. You see the diamonds?
Get corrected.
Pause it.
Oh yeah.
The diamonds. Those two diamonds.
Excellent.
The lights on there, on the left. The two same buildings. Yeah, those two. That's DJI.
Wow.
Yeah, they crash.
No, what I was gonna say is when you live in China, you get corrected. You know,
Yeah,
my
Shenzhen.
favorite story is actually my husband was coming to visit me in Hangzhou and mispronounced it, and the woman at the airline counter looked at him and she said Hangzhou, like she wanted to make sure he pronounced it correctly, and he was like, "I'm trying, I'm doing my best."
That's pretty good. Yeah, the only time I've been to China was on the way to just in the airport. I haven't been there yet. My wife's actually been to Beijing for work, but I haven't got a chance. And I really want to go to a bunch of the cities. It seems awesome.
It's fascinating. Yeah,
but in the airport they seem very mean. I don't know. They're just
that tracks.
I think it makes sense. It's security and stuff.
We joke about that when you learn Chinese language too. Chinese language instructors are mean. Like if they're telling you that you're doing great, that clearly is an American. If they're like, your Chinese sucks and you need to get better, you know they're actually Chinese and they're actually a proper Chinese language instructor.
Yeah. Where do you stand on like the Peter Zion demographic stuff with China? Like, do you do demographic studies?
I don't do much
Have you
with
talked about that?
demographics.
Okay.
No.
Basically, I'll give you the high
Yeah,
level.
give me the
I don't
pitch.
actually, I'm not a demographer,
Okay.
but apparently like their population is in collapse.
Oh, yes. I'm familiar with
In
that.
the next 100 years, they're going to like half.
Well, what I am following though is the Chinese government is putting in place a series of programs now to get the birth rate up, and they are not working. And because, some of them, the PR campaign was terrible. There was at one point, this is a couple years ago, it was basically like women get back in the kitchen and have babies, and smart, hardworking women were like, no, not interested.
So it's similar to like kind of
Western societies, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, birth rates
have
are going,
dropped.
they're going down. It's having kids is tough. It's probably why.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. But like, so yeah, that's a lot of people say like they're in a tough spot because of this. Yeah. My take is actually, I don't believe any of that. I just think robotics and automation are gonna take over. Like, I don't know, Elon today said he's gonna start mass producing the Optimus robots.
Oh, is he?
Like, humanoid robots are coming to do a lot of the work. So
I think in terms of
I think
manufacturing,
that you're not going to need a lot of like people as much. Like people, so the argument that demographics matter, usually when you hear these people talk, from what I understand, is they hold technology constant when they make the argument. So they're saying, look, if we have half the people and we can't support the GDP growth that we need, we're fucked. But all these demographers they forget to account for like technology. So like, I think we'll probably just need fewer people because we'll have a lot more automation to continue growing the GDP. That's my take. I don't know if that's right, but that's my take.
I mean, I do think it is very difficult to predict the effects of technology. So I agree with you there that like I don't know exactly how demographers account for that.
Of course, they make their thing the most important though.
Yeah.
Demography.
I mean, and the Chinese government thinks it's a concern. I mean, but then you've got that reverse. I mean, this is going back to the one-child policy in the 1980s. The reason China was able to experience such tremendous economic growth, many argue, is because it did have a one-child policy in place. So as it was growing, it was controlling its population, and some argue that that's why India has more challenges than China in terms of the economic growth with the demography. But in China now, the Chinese government thinks it's important. They actually do want the birth rate to increase. So far, it doesn't seem like the policies they're putting forward are making any difference.
Yeah. Well, so there's problems with like a lot of times the governments think they have more control over like what humans do than they do. Like, I don't know if there should be like necessarily policies around like trying to affect the birth rates.
Well,
like maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I mean, that's a great debate because in China, like I said, I mean,
central planned.
It was, there was people that they called them the barefoot doctors would go around to villages and actually monitor how many children families had. If you had more than one child, you would get fined. So China has a history of doing this.
Man, that's creepy.
Well, there's some great documentaries on that topic if you want to see creepy.
We'll put some in the show notes. Obviously, Jack's got it. He'll do it. All right. I want to go back to where we're talking. We're in the kitchen. We were talking about the Tibetan monks. Did you guys study that at CNA? The relationship with China? Over
time, we have done various projects to look at the Tibet issues. We haven't as much research.
What's the main issue?
Well, the main issue is that China views Tibet as a sovereign part of its territory. Okay. But some segments of the Tibetan population, particularly those that follow the Dalai Lama, do not believe
Dalai Lama. I like that. Nice.
Yeah.
I say that wrong. I said Dali. Dalai Lama.
For some reason, I think that's how we say it in America.
Can you
I
pull
hear
up the
other
map,
people
Tibet?
say
I want
that.
to see Tibet on the map, Jack. Jack, you're getting a lot of work today because I don't know anything about China. Like literally dumb. Here we go. Okay,
But
sorry,
this
I didn't
is
mean to
where-
interrupt.
No,
The
this
guests
is where actually
the guests are going to complain because I just interrupted you again. We get all these show comments that are like, "Dude, just let the guests talk. They're so smart." And shut up, Steve. Sorry. Okay, here we go. All right, now continue.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring it. So we were talking about earlier about Taiwan, and there's sort of a longer history of was it part of China or not. Same issue for Tibet. So there are some people that say, yes, it did, it was under the purview. There's others that maintain that it was always a separate place. For most of its history, Tibet had its own government. And then during the Qing dynasty, there was some tacit agreements that it sort of fell under the tributary system, but it didn't necessarily pay tribute. So there are these debates that historians can interpret in different ways. But basically, once Mao was in power, he actually sent PLA troops in to ensure that Tibet was a sovereign part of the People's Republic of China. And that's when the Dalai Lama had to basically leave and fled to India. And basically, Nehru in India gave the Tibetans basically a home in Dharamshala. And now that's where the Tibetan government in exile is based.
Oh, okay. So the actual exile government is in India.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this looks like Tibet, the region, doesn't look very inhabitable. Like,
Well,
is that
it's
all?
the Tibetan plateau. It is harsh. I mean, but it is inhabitable. But you're at pretty high altitudes. It's cold. It is definitely a challenge.
This is like a really high, cold plateau.
Yes.
Where's the nicest place to live in Tibet? What
I
do you
don't
guys
know. I
think?
have
South,
not.
is it like south near like
I have
Nepal?
never gotten the chance yet to get up to
I
Tibet.
mean, this
so
place
I don't
looks
know.
terrible.
Well, I mean, people go to Everest. So, if you're going to be, most people go to Everest from the Nepal side, not from the Chinese side. But
I mean, why even
That's
want?
beautiful.
I mean, what does China even want with this land?
well, it's more about, I think it's sort of,
Looks horrible.
have you heard of the century of humiliation?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes.
so that's this whole idea that these Western powers carved up China. And so for me, a lot of it just stems back to that. So the Chinese Communist Party wants to make sure what they view as Greater China is whole. And it's
Okay.
partly to just make up for what they view as a period of humiliation in their own history. So they want to sort of reestablish territorial control over all these areas, Tibet, Taiwan, that they felt was part of their previous history. And some of it's about legitimacy of the party, but a lot of it's also just about this sort of greater, like, we should have never been carved up in the first place, and this is our opportunity to maintain our sovereignty over any place that has been influenced by Chinese history and culture.
That makes sense. Do you think if we just like start telling them they're cool and they're good and they're not humiliated, they'll just be nicer? It was, hey guys,
I
you guys are
wish.
sick. You guys are awesome.
No, I had a great.
But we had to hype them up more. That's my diplomacy.
I had a great friend that was based in Hong Kong for a long time that used to just say that, like, if the Chinese Communist Party could just change the narrative, they could say they've already won. And like, hey, it's all good. We've fixed all this. That has not seemed to have been the case with the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
They always accuse the United States of being trapped in Cold War thinking. And I think it's funny to me when they say that because they are often also trapped in Cold War thinking.
They accuse us of being trapped in Cold War
Yes,
thinking.
often.
That does actually kind of make sense. We do talk about it a lot. We're in a Cold War with Russia. We're in a Cold War with China. We see that in the zeitgeist. I've seen that.
Definitely in the zeitgeist. I think policy, I think the challenge, personally, I think it's hard to compare what's going on right now in U.S.-China competition with the Cold War because China is so much more integrated in the global economy than the Soviet Union ever was. So I understand the analogy, but I think there are some problems with it historically because there were really two bifurcated economic systems in the Cold War that operated under very different circumstances, and that's not the world we live in today.
Yeah, China's out there. They're all over Africa. They're everywhere. Actually, before I started Allen Control Systems here, I was thinking about what to start, and I was gonna start a private military called World Marshal. How badass does that sound? World Marshal.
Yeah.
I just realized I wasn't the right guy for this company, so I decided to make a.
They're out there, though.
Well, I'll tell you. So there's a long-winded way of saying I learned a little bit about Chinese private militaries, which Chinese PMCs are very popular in Africa. There's a lot of them. I started doing like Google Translate on the Chinese PMC marketing websites, and they're the funniest websites ever. It's gonna be hard to find one. Don't worry about it, Jack. But like, you'd go to like these Chinese private military websites, and they'd be like, we're the best, nicest service for you. We use modern spreadsheets to track our logistics and our timing, and you guys can schedule us. And it's like, it's so funny. My interactions with Chinese businesses is they're always like very on the surface, like very sweet and nice. Like I've talked to like motors, like people, like when we were doing our last company, we would buy motors from Shenzhen for our restaurant tech company.
Yeah.
And they're always so nice to interact with. Like they're just like, oh, Steven, like very nice. We just want to sell you these motors so I can pay my family's dinner. And I just like you guys very much.
I
And
think
was
it's
like, that's very
partly
sweet of you.
maybe because you're Western too. Because when you see Chinese interact with one another in the competitive environment, they are cutthroat.
Yeah, the salespeople were just very nice. I don't know. But maybe it's just like, and then they hang up and they're like, fuck that guy. I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, so the Chinese private militaries, they're out there.
Yep.
China's way more integrated in the world economy. They're building the new Silk Road.
I don't know if they're more integrated. They are taking a different approach, but I certainly think in some regions, like on the African continent, no question. There's so much that is going on.
Yeah.
That's not one of the areas I specialize in, but whenever I read about it, I'm always shocked at how much is going on in different African countries in terms of their partnerships with China. So what China's done, though, is taken advantage of the post-World War II system that the United States built in terms of having an open economy. If you agree to the rules of that open economy, you can access that. And after China acceded to the World Trade Organization, they did that in a lot of respects. The problem was they didn't take on board everything that was supposed to be done, for instance, under the World Trade Organization. So there was a lot of stipulations they sort of just ignored. And now they're kind of moving, as you mentioned, the Silk Road. So the Belt and Road Initiative is sort of setting up a series of infrastructure chains that will link back to China. Some of this is about energy. Some of it is also about just having manufacturing bases that kind of are more reliant on the United States. And I think some of that's working, but some of that might not work in the long run. Maybe it's too soon to tell, but what I always point out to people about the Belt and Road is there's been some really successful projects, but there's been some huge disasters too. So it's not universally successful. And I worry, sometimes I hear people say, it's almost as if they're sort of jealous of the Chinese model. Oh, look, they have this whole of nation approach. And there's things China can do really well, but I don't want to oversell. Yeah. They have a lot of bureaucratic challenges themselves. So
I get it. Yeah. I mean, obviously anything centrally planned.
Exactly.
I mean, just think about our government. We're not even a big, we don't centrally plan as much as they do. And we still are all over the place sometimes, Yeah. All right, cool. So where are we? So take me to some of your current studies and current thinking around China. You said you're writing a book.
Yes.
Is that the first book or?
This is first, book manuscript. I mean, we do a lot of monographs, sort of in-depth research at CNA, but this one
Do you have a title for it?
Politics in the Zone.
In the Zone.
The working title right now. Yeah. So I was lucky enough.
Subtitle?
Debating on that.
You gotta have a subtitle.
It's like right now I've been debating between industrial districts and reforming China's economy, So yeah, it's going to have a subtitle. I'm still working.
Okay.
I'm still workshopping that one.
All right. I'll workshop it with you.
There you go.
Okay.
But basically that is sort of a pet project that grew out of my dissertation. So when I was in China doing dissertation research, I was doing a lot of archival research because basically at that time, all the records from the 80s and 90s, not much of it had been digitized. So the only way to actually get access to these materials was to go on site and literally take pictures or take notes from hard copy books. And so I spent months and months doing all that, but ended up collecting a lot of data that I just didn't need for my dissertation. So I wrapped up the dissertation, but all this data was left. And I was like, I have to do something with it. And last year, I was lucky enough to be awarded a Smith Richardson Foundation grant to actually put this manuscript together. So that's what I've been doing over the last year. And that's really we talked about Shenzhen. So that's the most famous special economic zone in China. But what people don't realize is there's thousands of special economic zones across China. Some of them are economic development zones. There's different zone program types. So the book manuscript goes into all of those details because what I think is important to understand is Shenzhen has a very specific ecosystem, but other cities and other zones have very different ecosystems. So it's a comparative book in terms of looking at other areas, how their zones were built, how they interacted with multinational corporations. In some instances, it's also about when those got out of control. This is why I love talking about ghost cities, because there was a period of time where the Chinese government realized it got out of control and then tried to crack down on and close a lot of these zones. And that's what resulted in these ghost cities. So the book goes into a chapter on that topic. And it's looking at the broader, reform era, which is basically from 1978 to the present, and then debating about whether or not are we in a new state of affairs with Xi Jinping, because there's a lot of things Xi Jinping is doing that are a fundamental break from the Deng Xiaoping era, and so that's sort of where I leave the conclusion right now is discussing those topics.
And when do you think this book will drop?
I don't know yet. I'm still working on the
You're
revisions.
a true artist. You can't be rushed.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
Yeah, you will not be rushed.
I can't control those timelines either, because that's there's external things going on. So I hesitate.
That's what I tell my investors. I can't control.
Hello, listeners. Producer Jack here. Thanks for listening this far. Unfortunately, we discovered a technical issue with the audio recording for these last 25-ish minutes of the episode, resulting in us having to use the audio from the cameras instead of the mics. The content is still great, so stick around and keep watching and listening, but that's why the audio quality takes quite a hit at this point. Sorry about that. We'll have it fixed for future episodes. Now back to the show.
All right, so what other regions of China are interesting? There's a big country.
Well, I mean, then we can always shift back to our Taiwan topic.
We're coming back to the monks. We're coming back to the monks for sure. We didn't even get to the whole point yet, but we're going to wait for a second. While we're at the map up, so this is a modern map, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is not. So what are some other regions? So like just high level for the viewers, like what's...
Well, so we'll start up top by Beijing.
Yeah.
So that's the national capital region up there. So that's, people used to get annoyed with me when I would say this, but I used to always compare Beijing and Washington, D.C. because there are two cities where everyone thinks what they have going on is the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And in that way, Beijing and Washington, D.C. are very similar because they think the world revolves around them. And when people don't get that, they get very irritated.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's obviously the center of power in China, so it's important. I lived there for a while, though, and in terms of place to live, did not love living in Beijing. So,
okay.
But this is also back when the pollution was really bad, where we would have air quality days where you just literally couldn't breathe. You just sit in your apartment with your air purifier, hoping to not have black lung, which I still have coughing fits now that I blame on living in Beijing. And so that's sort of...
I bet. I mean, the air quality there is horrible.
It was bad. I've heard in Beijing it's gotten better. I hope that's true, because when I was there, it was awful. And then if you sort of go down the coastline, I tend to think of the coastline.
Yep.
So I've traveled all through these parts too. This is sort of other manufacturing hubs that maybe don't get as much attention. Shenzhen, but that's all along this eastern seaboard. You move down to Shanghai. Shanghai is just, it's one of my favorite cities to visit. Like if you do ever get a chance to go.
Shanghai is where to go. That's great. Let's visit to China. Where are we going? Shanghai?
You do have to go to Beijing so you can go up to the Great Wall. I mean, it's worth it. It's one of those wonders of the world that you just have to see. I still do a lot of hiking up there too. It is really.
Do you think it's safe for me to go now?
Safe?
So can I go?
Well,
I run an AI company, and it's more advanced than any gun they ever made. So,
I mean, I think the challenge now is as long as you're not doing anything controversial there. What has concerned me with some of what they're doing is, if you've heard, but they have basically exit bans. There is some foreign business people they have held, and they never said why. So it was sort of like they get to the airport and they're like, you can't leave. And they're like, well, why? And they're like, don't know. There haven't been a ton of cases of that, but there have been enough that I think it's something to remain cognizant of.
Sounds scary. I really want to go, but I feel like I can't. I don't know. I want to go
keep watching the environment. Yeah. I would say
that.
Unfortunately, I haven't been back in a while, and it's the same concerns. Like I do enough work that, you sometimes do wonder. The challenge about China's government is you don't always know what's on. There used to be a time where we kind of knew what was controversial and what wasn't. Right now, I feel like you don't know what is controversial. I mean, there was like a pharma exec from Japan that was held, and it didn't seem like anything he had done was even terribly controversial. And so it never made sense to me. And they said they were holding him on, quote, national security grounds. And that was it. And I think he was finally released a while ago.
Okay. So anyway, so Shanghai. Oh, actually, I really want to go to Taiwan before we can anymore either. That would be good.
I don't think you have any. There's no concerns about going to Taiwan. So
no,
definitely.
For the next year or two, obviously.
Wait until China invades? Is that what you're insinuating?
Yeah, I think you have a limited 24 months here to get there. If you want to go, yeah.
I'm hoping we have more time than that, but if not, get going. It's definitely worth it.
I want to check Taipei out.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
great town.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a company retreat there, Jack. Bring the whole company. Yeah. I mean, before we can, it's like we're pretty much out. Like I'm telling you, we don't have much time.
Well, the mountains are great. I mean, if you like outdoor stuff too, Taiwan is also great for that. There's hiking, rock climbing, all sorts of great outdoor.
I don't really like outdoor stuff, but I mean, look at me. I mean, as a kid, I just played a bunch of World of Warcraft and like video games and didn't go outside very much. So, but I'll get into it for this. It'll probably be so
You don't have to. I mean, you can just stay in the city and like hang out in Taipei and have a great time.
doing it. I was doing it. We're going to do outdoor shit. I'm doing it. We're going to hike, climb mountains. It's going to be awesome.
I mean, the mountains are great. I mean, I think that one of the best things about Taiwan is actually seeing the terrain. I mean, the terrain is just phenomenal, mountainous. It's also why those of us who study the People's Liberation Army always fascinate when people talk about an amphibious landing, because the terrain there is awful for it. Like, anyone who wants to do that, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so this is cool. All right, so back down to the coastline. So Shanghai, then after Shanghai, what are we at? That's just a bunch of cities. Any of these cities notable?
Oh, well, I mean, I think so. Like, I've spent time in Ningbo. Wenzhou is a very cool city just in terms of the manufacturing history.
Yeah.
So they actually, for a while, were like the shoe capital of China. Like, if you wanted nice Italian-style leather shoes, you could get that from Wenzhou.
That's hot.
Yeah, I mean, it was just really cool. They had some really strong manufacturing ties. Actually, I think at one point with Italian designers of shoes. So if you continue down this coastline, a lot of these cities each have kind of unique basically strengths in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because then you start going back down, you get down to like Shantou, which was another one of the special economic zones that was started in the late 1970s.
And the climate, where are we at climate-wise compared to the U.S.?
Warm, hot. You're getting humid weather down here. Yeah. You're definitely going to sweat.
It's like now we get down to like Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau. This is all like that weather.
Yeah, you're getting.
Do they have winters? Do they have cold winters?
The challenge is the temperatures never get that cold, but in southern China, you tend to not have any sort of heating systems. So what happens is in the buildings, it's going to feel much colder than outside. Like if you go outside, you're probably going to be warmer. When I lived in Hangzhou, it would be maybe 50 degrees outside, but that meant it was going to be like 45 inside. So you wear like long underwear to class and things like that because they don't have central heating, but it doesn't stay cold for very long. So once it passes, then you're fine. And then it's great weather.
I really want to go to Macau.
Gamble? Do you like to gamble?
I love to gamble.
Okay.
I'm a startup entrepreneur. What do you?
Okay, you like to gamble.
Baccarat.
It is the sort of Vegas of East Asia.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a little grittier, though.
Yeah, I want some gritty. Yeah, that's what I want.
Okay, you should definitely.
Gritty Macau Baccarat.
And then when you go there, also get the egg tarts. They have Portuguese egg tarts. It was a Portuguese colony, so you have this food culture that was sort of influenced by that. And the egg tarts in Macau are phenomenal. Best in the world.
Egg tarts in Macau. You heard it on the pod. We dropped it here. We're giving the real...
I do like... I don't actually gamble, but I do like... It's a fun little city.
Okay, so maybe it was Macau skyline. I want to see it. I've never actually looked at it. But yeah, so we taught the guests a lot about
food,
and about the region. It seems like a lot of the commerce and a lot of the activities on the coast.
Yes.
It's like, and then inside is like all the mainland, like farm stuff, like in the inner China.
Some of it they're trying to move. Actually, I mean that's interesting in terms of their development. So that's what they opened first was the coastal regions, obviously because easy access to ports. But over time, the manufacturing has moved inland because of cheaper labor costs, things like that. But some of the transportation networks have improved enough to make that work. Some haven't. But what I think is really interesting in terms of the sort of computing space is they're trying to move a lot of the data centers further inland just so they could have more reliable energy sources and things like that.
Well, they want to put like power plants near them and away from the people and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really setting up well in their energy plan compared to us. I mean, they're building all the nuclear reactors.
Don't get me started on this, and we need to work on it.
We'll all talk about it. So Macau here. Yeah, it looks like a nice gambling town.
No, I mean, yeah, if you like to gamble. It's a place.
I think they got is that a win? Is there a win in Macau?
There is, I think so.
Oh, yeah, I think they exiled Steve Wynn there. No, I think they ran Steve Wynn out of Vegas.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's not a bad place.
So he decided to open up his own win in Macau.
Well, there you go.
What do you think? Is there a lot of foreign travel to Macau? Like a lot of...
There used to be. I don't know what it's like post-COVID, to be honest. I would say there used to be a ton. And I was there, I think the last time I was in Macau was maybe 2017.
Yeah.
Probably. So back then, there was certainly a lot of foreigners, a lot of expats. Like I said, post-COVID, I'm not sure.
In your friend circles, do you think that they started COVID or what's the deal with that?
I wish they would be more forthright with their answers because at the end of the day, we don't know. China clearly does not want to talk about it. I think there is a ton of unanswered questions.
Yeah. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. We do talk, the podcast, we get into conspiracy theories.
Okay.
It's fun.
Because it is fun.
It's fun. I want to believe. But like this one, it's like the X-Files. I want to.
Oh, I do love it.
Yeah, that's the poster I want.
Okay.
That's why. Because the conspiracy theories are, like a lot of them, obviously aren't, like the moon landing. Like obviously we went to the moon.
Yeah.
But it's fun to think that we didn't. Obviously we did, though. Everyone knows we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, but in the case of the Wuhan like lab or whatever, like it just seems like they probably made it. I mean, who knows?
I mean, the weird thing was about the timelines, and what is sad to me is like the doctor that first discovered that something was going on in Wuhan unfortunately passed away during the pandemic. And so we're left with so many unanswered questions because there still, when I was looking at this a few years ago, I remember there was discrepancies even in the dates of when they think they saw the first case. And that kind of stuff matters to tracking down where did it actually start. And they have just, the Chinese government has been absolutely unwilling to talk about that.
I think conventional wisdom now in the zeitgeist is that they definitely made it, and that it's the conspiracy theory that it came from a bat. So I think it's the other way now. I think most people think they did it.
Yeah. And I just wish we knew more about, and I'm not.
Just so you know, Chinese leadership, I'm not calling you out. I didn't say you did it. Like, I can still go to Macau and play Baccarat. Like, don't get out.
I know you got to save yourself.
They're going to be like, Steve, we have this video of you saying we started this. And I'll be like, no. I said,
you don't understand.
People might, it's a language barrier. I said, you might have started it. Might have.
I mean, sadly now, though, for the people that specialize in that, we'll never know. I mean, that's an important lesson learned for the globe about how diseases start. But unfortunately, we're never going to know.
I know. Well, we'll see on the next pandemic if it starts in the same lab. Okay, if there's another one and they show that it comes from that town, come on, right?
Then we got to do some more digging.
Then we got to be like, guys, we got you dead to rights here. It's 2 for 2. Like, come on, bros, stop this shit. Yeah. All right, so that's fun. It's terrible. Okay, what other interesting Chinese stuff that I haven't asked about yet? Just like, what am I missing? You got a binder here.
Well, I was laughing because I thought this is the drone ultimatum. I thought we were going to talk drone sector and getting into the drone program.
We're talking about Baccarat. No, let's talk drones. Let's talk drones.
No, I mean, what I think is
the drone ultimatum. Yeah.
Well, when I brought up the Taiwan issue, that's what was so interesting to me about when we did it. So we, a group of my CNA colleagues started a study that initially I wasn't part of, but one of the lead authors actually left to take another job, so I had to take over the project. And that was the Taiwan lessons learned from Ukraine. And what was so interesting to me is, like, we all knew drones were a big deal in the Ukraine war, but Taiwan is now trying to build their own drone program. And they're like, but we don't want to rely on China for parts and components and all that.
Yep.
And so it's really interesting to see that because China controls so much of the drone market, that now you've got, places like Taiwan, they're like, how do we actually build a drone ecosystem from scratch, and not just in Taiwan, they have partners that they can work with, but how do you do that? So I just think that's interesting in terms of, what happened in Shenzhen with the drone market there was really organic, and it was people looking for a niche and thinking about new creative ways you could use this technology. And that's what did it. Going back to our debate about central planning versus innovation, will that work? So I just think that's...
So you're saying in Taiwan, they're trying to centrally plan drone manufacturing?
Well, the government is taking steps to encourage the growth, but they are trying to rely on their innovation ecosystem to do so. So our national drone program has a lot of private sector entities and research institutes as part of it. So it's not a purely like state-driven model, but that's also, a lot of people talk about China and their economic programs and say state-driven. But I would say in the drone sector, it wasn't state-driven. A lot of the stuff did come from the bottom up, because there was an innovation ecosystem in Shenzhen. So Taiwan's trying to kind of do a little bit of both, give national level incentives and programs, but also let the private sector do it and take advantage of, for instance, U.S., Japanese, other countries' expertise. And it's too soon to know if this is going to work. But I think in terms of the future of sort of drones, it's going to be interesting to see if it works.
Where do you stand on the DJI ban in the U.S.? Should we do it?
I'm on the fence with that one because most of their quadcopters, I think I don't think they're a concern. Like if your average sort of aficionado or someone who's doing maybe like agricultural stuff wants to use them, I don't have a problem with that. One of the conversations I've had with some academics that also look at, because we've had this discussion as it relates to solar panels, can you take a piece of Chinese hardware, redo the software so you're not, concerned about data getting sent back to data centers in China and then still use the hardware. We've talked about this a lot. With the folks that do solar panels, like, can we take the solar panels, not use their software, because I don't want my Internet of Things data going back to China, but can you use the hardware and redo the software in a way that ensures, cybersecurity and other?
Yeah.
And so I think we have to have those conversations.
It sounds like, I'm going to, just to make it controversial, so the kids, as they say, that sounds like a lot of Coke. The kids say. I think that the hardware is the product here.
Yeah.
Like the manufacturing.
I agree.
And, one of the problems that Taiwan is going to have, what they're trying to do, which you just mentioned, or the U.S., is that these are on Walmart shelves.
Yeah.
So, like, they're pumping out lots of drones to consumers.
Yep.
And they look like toys.
They are toys.
They aren't toys. But the infrastructure behind it is not a toy. The manufacturing is not. And they're able to subsidize that with all the money we spend on these things. And there is no way, without a huge consumer sales pipeline, to build a DJI of the U.S. So without banning it, we have no shot at having a consumer DJI. Because as an entrepreneur, what am I supposed to do? Is there $200 a month?
Yeah.
Well,
and they're already controlling them.
How do I start selling? Because I can't even, I'd have to first make one as good as this and then cheaper and then get it on Walmart shelves.
Well, I think there's two components. So first of all, to your point about subsidies, I do want to come back to that, because what I was saying earlier in the show, we were talking about the World Trade Organization. What was so interesting about when China joined the World Trade Organization, they did bring down tariffs dramatically. You can see tons of great data on them, but there was a lot of other rules and regulations that China was supposed to implement under WTO that they did not. And sadly, that was sort of a missed opportunity for the United States, because we should have actually recognized the role that subsidies play in the innovation ecosystem in China much sooner than we did. So to your point, we're now playing catch up. Like, how do you now catch up with a company like DJI? It's going to be far more difficult. So unfortunately, I worry in that particular case might be too late. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have debates about where export controls make sense. Actually, this morning, I was driving and I was listening to, there was a U.S.-China Commission testimony on the Hill today about robotics and should we have export controls on robotics. And so I think there are debates of areas, robotics, biotechnology, and others, where we do need to talk about export controls. We do need to talk about how to do that. I worry in the commercial drone market, we're kind of past the point of no return. So I don't know if we're going to be able to compete.
Yeah.
With
where I want to add, and I think this is what's maybe lost on some of the people that think about this, is that it's not a commercial drone market and a military drone market. They're the same. That's the point.
It can't, well,
they're the same.
Yes and no.
They're the same because the DJI Mavic is a weapon. Legit.
True.
And that thing is $1,100.
Yeah.
And it savages tanks. So in the commercial market is the key to the military market, because that's what gives you the margins and the money and the cash flow in the manufacturing to pump this stuff out. And so, like, without a commercial drone market, we're never going to be anywhere close in the military side.
So then I would ask you the question, though, what are we doing enough on the military side? Because China's also...
Well, I personally think the military side of it's mostly pointless without a commercial... because you have to have the scale. The company needs to have the scale in the revenues of the commercial side to, like, really pump out or create military products on it. I think the commercial market is the military market. Because, like, what you really want is just, like, consumer off-the-shelf drones you strap bombs to.
Yeah. Well, then we do have to have a conversation in the U.S. about what does that look like? Because one thing that U.S.
That's like DJI 1.
Well,
that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's why I worry that point of no return. But I think in the broader questions of what's going on in the future is we do have to have that debate. And America's always been about the free market. It's one of the things that makes us great. So if we're going to have industrial policy, we need to figure out what actually makes sense and in what sectors we could have impact that would be useful to, useful to these industries.
To be clear, I don't know if I advocate a DJI ban. I'm not a policymaker.
Yeah.
I just, my observation is that the businesses here are so far behind on this that we just I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what to do. I think at some point I will advocate for, maybe I'll come out and give a hard opinion, but not yet. We will announce my opinion at some point.
I mean, to your point, if it didn't already control so much of the market, I think there could be a better case. Right now, I don't know how you catch up.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just worried about it. Like And I worry that policymakers think that like it's a toy, and it's not a toy.
Oh, it's not a
These
toy.
products are sad.
But don't you think the Russia-Ukraine conflict has shown us that it's not a toy? I mean, to me,
Well, but they think a lot of people think like, oh, these are militarized drones, but if you actually like look closely, like they're modifying Mavics, like a lot of it. So like,
I'm actually fascinated by that commentary because for me, I think I would put myself in the camp of someone who looked at it as just a toy until Russia-Ukraine, and then you see that and you're like, oh, there are some really interesting applications of these tools. More for not just the armed drones, but if you think about, command and control and these other things, that I think that's been fascinating. And I would think that that's been recognized by policymakers, but maybe I'm wrong.
and then you got to check it out. So pull like Anduril's Bolt. Oh yeah. We'll hit this up. This is our boys at Anduril. I don't know if it's Anduril or Anduril, but whatever. Okay, so like, oh yeah. Okay, so like this is pretty sick. See, pause it right there. Okay, Bolt. Okay, so like this is a quadcopter. That's a weaponized one, right? Okay. This costs like, I don't know, I'm not gonna misquote it, but it's like $10,000 or something.
Oh, really? Okay.
So like we're talking, 10x the cost of a Mavic, but it's the most American version because it's got all this extra stuff. Like
That's very American.
it's badass.
Let's put on all sorts of extra stuff.
No, it's AI. Well, it's AI enabled. Okay, that's good. You can pull that down now. But anyway, so like this is the kind of thing we're trying to do. We have companies that are trying to make like more badass quadcopters, but they're not. No consumer will get this.
That's what I was gonna say.
And so like
That
now,
price point.
so what we're doing. So imagine thinking about the cash flow. So now they go to Congress or they go to their customer and they say, hey, buy some of these. The quantities we're buying, it's nowhere near the quantities they get to pump out for the world. Because remember, there's not on our Walmart shelves. These are on shelves everywhere. And so like, we're just, yeah, I mean, they're just at the volumes we're talking. It's just insane compared to like something exquisite like this.
Yeah.
I would call this more of like an exquisite drone.
Yeah. And you're right. There's not going to be a commercial. I mean, that is what I think is great about the American economic system. It is free market, but that's the problem with that is if you can't actually put out a product that's going to have a demand signal for it, your average consumer is not going to drop $10K on it.
Yeah. Well, they would never. Well, and it's also this is a weapon. This is a deadly weapon. So we can't even sell it to a consumer. But
nor would we want. I mean, I feel like there's already been a bunch of drone stories about going into airspace that we're trying to control. So we don't really want armed drones in that airspace.
Anyway, this is fascinating. This is one of my favorite topics. It's fascinating because anyway, that's why our company, we made it because we figured we couldn't do it. So we just had to say, let's shoot them. The bullets. So that's what we, I don't know if you looked into it, but that's what we do. We make like an AI gun.
Nice.
That we shoot the drones down. You can pull it up, Jack. You can pull up the.
What are you going to do about like large quantity of the numbers? Do you have?
Yeah, we can shoot like one drone a second. So
okay.
So you imagine like 60 drones are coming in.
Yeah.
We have a couple turrets, like pop, 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 pop. So like.
Well, Taiwan's working on counter drone stuff too. Maybe you can sell with that.
So, we don't really sell. We're more of a vibe.
Vibe.
Okay. So this is like. So imagine like you have this, and then this is to shoot the drones. Okay. Because the idea of the company was that we can't stand toe-to-toe with Chinese manufacturing dominance. Yeah. So instead, we use like $1 a bullet. The bullet costs $1. This is $1,000. Well, that's 200, but the Mavic's $1,000. So pop them.
Okay.
That's the plan. We'll see.
We'll see. I got a few years.
It's going to crash, I think, but we got a few years.
We don't know.
Don't tell that to my engineering team. Get going. They don't have a few years.
We don't know. I mean, that's where on any given day, if China gets mad enough, they could change their timeline.
Yeah. Okay, so now that you're back when did you get back stateside?
In the fall.
Okay. Are you itching to get back out there again, or?
Well, I mean,
are you going to buy some place here?
I love tropical islands. We did some island hopping to the Pacific, and I definitely miss it. So I would consider going back. Yeah. But this is a fun area too.
Oh, is your husband?
Unlike you,
is your husband like traveling a lot too?
Yeah, and we love all the outdoor stuff. I was going to say, unlike you, we love all the outdoor. So the rock climbing, the hiking, you name it, snowboarding. If we can get outside, we're pretty.
Are you snowboarding?
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the mountains.
I'm afraid of them.
Yeah, I mean, what if I get hurt? It's dangerous.
Well, you will get hurt.
You're crazy.
No, you will get hurt. I've torn my Achilles tendons snowboarding. It healed though. It's fine.
Healed. Oh, it's so dangerous. Skiing and snowboarders are crazy.
Actually, I think rock climbing is way more dangerous than skiing.
Have you like watched those like videos like people like free climbing?
Oh,
like,
free solo, I can't do it. No, actually, it makes me want to actually throw up watching.
what's like the Mark Hamill like? Have you seen that?
Free solo, it's my God.
Alex Honnold.
That's it.
Mark Hamill. Okay, well let's start Star Wars.
Luke Skywalker.
You gotta be like a really ignorant podcast host. Like I don't really know what's going on. You know? Oh yeah, Mark Hamill, free base. Okay, yeah, Alex.
Free solo is terrifying to watch. I just can't even fathom.
No,
They never. I use a lot of protection, ropes, safety, things like that.
It's so crazy. It's so scary. But yeah, but skiing and snowboards, everyone I've ever met's like, yeah, I tore my ACL, I ripped my knee up, all that shit. Yeah. But
Wrong. I mean, there is that risk.
I raise a lot of money from venture capitalists, and they get, they're very rich people, so they love skiing and stuff. Like they're always talking about it, and I'm like, I'm terrified of this. I was like, you guys enjoy. I try to catch them when they're not on the mountain, so I can get my investment. But they're usually like, in Tahoe or like.
But you do got to learn young. I will say that. Like I grew up in Wisconsin, so I had to find something to do this 9-month-long winters we had there. So
I love Wisconsin.
snowboarding was the answer.
I love Wisconsin. Wausau.
Oh,
Wausau, yeah. A lot of my friends are in Wausau. They play Star Wars cards with
yeah. So I grew up a couple hours north.
Stevens Point, or
Well, no. So I grew up literally on Lake Superior.
oh, really? Okay.
Right on the.
Oh, wow.
My high school was literally a mile from the lake. Like you could see Lake Superior from it. So there was no.
Yeah. Have you read to Stevens Point?
I have been to Stevens. Not a long time, but yeah.
I was just up there a couple years ago.
Good.
Hanging. The author Patrick Rothfuss lives there. It's like The Name of the Wind. You read that? And you read The Name of the Wind? Yeah, it's really good. It's going to be like eventually it's going to be a TV show.
In the third book, he's never going to release.
He's never going to write a third book. So he wrote 2 books and it's a trilogy, and then it's been 13 years. I remember when
writing a book slow.
Yeah. I actually remember when I was in the Navy. I was here in 2008. I was stationed here in the Navy Yard, and I would always see all these people reading The Name of the Wind on the metro. Yeah. And that's when I found it, and I started reading this book, and I devoured it. So good. And then the next book came out like 2009, 2010, devoured it, and now it's been 14 years. And there's no third.
That's on my reading list, though.
Well, don't read it because the third one's not coming out. And I know the guy because I like as an entrepreneur, I really loved this thing so much that I wanted to build a card game and is set in his world. So when he was at a book signing in San Francisco in 2012, I cold approached him at the book signing as a crazy fan, and I was like, "Hi, Patrick. You don't really know me, but I really want to build a card game in your world." And he's like, "Get away from me, weirdo!" No, literally, he was like, "Get away." And I was like, okay, well, I'll hit you up about it later. And then I went home and I built a whole elaborate website and a fake version of the game digitally, like it's fake. And I like sent him, I was like, hey, you met me at the book signing and you told me to send you this. He didn't tell me to send it.
Yeah. You just sent it.
And then he was like, wow, this looks really good. And then I like struck up a friendship with him. I've known him for like 10 years. Yeah. But like every time I reach out, he'll be like, okay, but we're still not doing this game, bro. So we're not like really friends, but I say we are.
But is he going to write the third book?
No. Well, no, he doesn't like to be asked about that.
Well, no, actually, no, that's true. Writers were very cagey about that.
He's an artist.
Yeah. Don't tell us when. We don't like deadlines. We don't like due dates.
Yeah. So anyway, so the Patrick Rothfuss story is ongoing. After I sold my last company to DoorDash, I immediately emailed him though. And I was like, hey, I just sold my last company. I have plenty of money. I will fund all of this. And he's like, still no. But we're still friends-ish. And I think that after ACS is done, wherever this goes, I'm going to hit him up again and be like, all right, just obviously Allen Control Systems just went public, and now I'm ready to build this card game in your world. Let's go, bro. That's one of my
persistence.
Persistence matters in entrepreneurship. And so I'm going to get him.
All right. Oh, I think persistence matters in so.
Yeah, it does matter.
Yeah, so many areas.
Everything. It's all it is. That's life. So what else is in the binder then on drones? What do we got? Let's pop it open.
No, this is, I think, I know what it was. When Jack first reached out to me, he actually asked him what testimony I did in 2023. Nice. So I was actually getting into the base of a Chinese arms sales because what...
Can I check it out?
Okay. No, because what I wanted to do is I gave testimony to the U.S.-China Commission in 2023 about China's defense exports and their sort of the overall system. And I hadn't had a chance to update that data. So when Jack actually originally reached out, I'm like, oh, I'd love to look at that data because what's been fascinating is China has moved up the charts in terms of overall arms sales. For about a decade, they were number 5 in terms of ranking globally. And now they're moving up to 4, and that's pretty much
this is our territory. We're the best at they're trying to take our commerce now.
Yeah, they're trying to move up, and it's still they only still represent about 7% of global arms sales. But what's actually been interesting is they are making up for the declines coming from Russia, because obviously Russia has been seeing capacity challenges. And so I went back and looked at that research from several years ago. And one of the arguments I had made then is that in places like Africa, Russia and China were competing, but now as Russia has less capacity, it's actually creating an opportunity for China to do more arms sales. So it's actually helping their defense industry, the fact that Russia is more challenged because it's got so many resources going to Ukraine. Okay, so I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, this is great. So we'll put this on the, Jack, you'll have to scan this in or something. Or
I can give you the link. That was in the Stockholm.
But what I'm seeing here for the people who aren't on video, share of global arms imports, United States, 43%. So that means we're importing. You mean importing?
Well, they're talking, the way SIPRI does its numbers is, so that's U.S. export.
Okay.
Numbers of imports in other
countries. Okay. Yeah. So we dominate at 43%. Then we have France at 8.4%. This is 2022.
Yeah, that's the last available. Europe.
7.6% for Germany. China is 7.2%. So they're fourth. But the interesting part you have highlighted here is the 125% change.
Yep. That's what I think is interesting.
Investors like that. That's a growth rate, bro.
Yeah.
Up and to the right. Growth rate. Okay. So that's popping. That's it.
No, so that's why. Why I looked at it, because like I said, I looked at the stuff I had written several years ago and was like, oh, this is what I need to update. So I'm putting that on my to-do list for the next few months.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is very interesting. Good info.
No, I love when I get questions like that, because one of the challenges of the way we do business at CNA is you do a project, but once the project ends, it sort of just ends unless you have time to go do the research. And so getting asked this question, though, made me think about it. So I just wanted to do some follow-up research because I think this topic's fast.
I appreciate that. And what do you, I haven't read all this yet, but I wanted to add a couple of questions I had. Maybe you know, or you don't. So of the things that they're sending to other countries, is it munitions?
That's what's so interesting to me about the change. So in the 90s and the 2000s, it was mostly missile systems, things like that. But over time, right now for China, what they're mostly exporting is aircraft and ships. I think you've probably heard the shipbuilding capacity is amazing in China. So that's been really interesting. So it really...
Maybe we should buy some ships.
Well, we do need
some ships, yeah.
Well, hopefully, we're supposed to be building some ships with South Korea. So I hope that happens, because they're actually excellent shipbuilders. But what's interesting is, like I said, so in the 90s, China was kind of like the supplier of last resort. If you were a middle or low income country and you really couldn't afford good stuff, then you went to China. But that's really changed. And it's changed in terms of aircraft and obviously ships we just mentioned. But in aircraft, that includes military grade drones. And so that's where I think there is an interesting take, because for a while there was restrictions from the U.S. and the European Union on selling armed drones to countries. Now that's changed. The U.S. changed those restrictions a few years ago. But in that time period, so basically from 2010 to 2020, China filled that niche. They said, well, we'll sell armed drones to these countries. There's 16...
Oh, yeah, actually, I'm looking at this right here. This is interesting to me. So you wrote this?
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about the United Arab Emirates ship. Let's talk about that a little, because that's related to this. Now China's selling these UAVs to them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the
UAE tries to buy from us too, though.
They did. They buy a lot of stuff to the United States. This goes back to what I was just talking about, those restrictions. So at the time when the United Arab Emirates wanted these armed drones, neither the U.S. or any European companies would sell because of these export control restrictions. So they went to China, and China said, absolutely. They were selling to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Libya. Yeah. And so, like I said, the U.S. has changed some of those restrictions so that we can sell to partners and allies. But China really took advantage of filling that niche in terms of their armed drones.
Wow. Yeah, no, I didn't actually know this.
Yeah, that's online. That's on our CNA website, so we can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, put that in the show notes. This is good. Also, I should read more, Kid can't even read.
There's a lot out there. Oh, and then that's the Taiwan report. So that's also publicly the Taiwan lessons learned from Ukraine. So I can send you the link for that as well.
Okay, this will be really good to read too. I should probably read this. Nice. This will be good to have for. This is all public?
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for this?
Nope. This is all free and publicly available.
Just read out the title for the listeners.
Oh yeah.
You can taste it.
Taiwan lessons learned from the Russia-Ukraine war. Some key takeaways. You said you had a couple?
Oh, well, on that one, well, the biggest thing is I think it's a really rich area of research on that topic. We ended up, we actually were inundated. Sometimes when you start a research project, you're worried like, oh, what if there's not a lot of info on this topic? We were sort of inundated with data. So we ended up having to sort of scope the project. And in the end, we focused on 5 main areas. So basically, Taiwan is making force structure changes. They're making personnel changes. So how they train their military. They're making changes to basically what I was talking about earlier with the National Drone Program. They've also looked at everything that's going on in Ukraine as it relates to satellite communications and using Starlink. They don't have Starlink there, so now they're trying to do some other plans to get satellite connectivity. And then we talk about lessons learned in terms of cognitive warfare. So the report goes into depth on all 5 of those topics. And then we end the report with sort of, here's areas that you need to monitor if you want to evaluate whether or not Taiwan's actually making progress on these goals.
And then who funded this research?
That was self-funded. So CNA internally, we have a pot of money that we kind of have our own innovation incubator, this idea of you can put proposals forward. That's what that was funded by. So we hope to continue doing that research. So
it looks great.
Yeah.
Can I have some of that money?
That's internal. That's our internal fund. You have to.
Do we do a party or something, and then I get some of it? I'm just trying to get some money.
We understand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a challenging environment.
Can I get some of that funding? Come on. Well, okay, what's in that folder?
Oh, this was the old. So when I was saying about the defense exports, I like maps and graphics.
Oh, me too.
So I hate written reports. Yeah. So I did make a handout when I did that original report because I'm like, we need some maps. We need some graphics that actually show. And this has changed slightly.
This is thick cardstock.
Yeah. But this is the one that actually shows where China. So for a while, as I said, they were sort of hit or miss with where they sold. They sold mostly in Asia, but there was really kind of no rhyme or reason to the countries other than the fact that the biggest buyer of Chinese arms for years has been Pakistan. So that's kind of
makes sense.
But yeah, like I said, I like maps. I feel like
this is a really good. Actually, we should get this graphic up on the show at some point. Just this one.
Yeah, and that one's on the website.
That's a very interesting.
Although it reminds me that I need to update.
Yeah,
the data.
It's still good though.
It's real. I
the context. Yeah. All right, here we go. So just a couple things for the listeners here, not on the video. China arms exports are driven by 4 main factors: technological upgrading to support China's national security, defense spending and civilian military integration, fewer export control restrictions, and arms affordability. Yeah, I can see that. Affordability is definitely, I mean, it's cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, middle income countries, that's where you're going to go. I mean, they just have no affordable things.
Dangerous world out there.
It is a dangerous world.
Yeah. Business of war. It's booming.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made.
Man. So what's the next for CNA for the rest of the year? What's the big initiatives? Trump's in the White House now. What do we got?
I think we're also trying to figure out where, but there's a lot of change. I feel like, as I said at the start of the podcast, I'm shocked at how much change has happened. So sometimes it's hard to keep up. So we are just trying to keep up on that. But in terms of our research agenda, things we already do that we're going to continue doing, as I said, we do a lot of work with economic statecraft. So how does China get the technology it needs, whether it's domestic innovation, whether it's stealing from others? So that work will continue. We have a lot of people looking at specific aspects of the People's Liberation Army. Right now, I'm mostly focused on the economic statecraft side of things. We have a newsletter called Intersections that talks about these issues. Broader U.S.-China competition, but also gets into the specifics of the technology. We started producing that. We, for about 3 years, did produce an AI newsletter, but that sunset. But we do still cover AI. Actually, we're debating about the next issue. Do we include DeepSeek? Discussions of that. Yeah. But that's another one I could put a link in.
Where do you, what do you think about China overfishing seas and stuff? Do they fish too much?
Well, a lot of countries overfish. That's a huge challenge. The Pacific Islands, that's a particularly huge challenge. The challenge with that, though, is also it's not just China. So many East Asian countries have...
Yeah, but do they like to fish the most? There's a lot of people in China. There's a lot of fish.
There's a lot of people. And food security is a genuine issue in China. They are concerned about... They don't have, like, the Midwest the way we do in the U.S. in terms of the breadbasket of...
Yeah, so they need these fish.
They do. I mean, they are doing a lot of fishing.
Food security.
Well, they're
like, come on, just give me these fish. What if we just said to them, you get all the fish, but that's not being a Cold War.
Oh, but it's not theirs to take. Most of this fish, well, one, we don't want to ruin all the fish stocks. As someone who loves sushi, like, let's not ruin...
What can we just tell them, like, don't overfish it, bro. Don't overdo it. Just catch some of the fish.
The incentive structure is still... I mean, ironically, I've talked over the years with colleagues in the Pacific Islands about stuff like the tuna treaty. Like the tuna treaty was critical to replenishing stocks, but if
Did they obey it?
some countries did, some countries didn't. There's still work to be done.
Do we know if China obeyed it? They need those fish.
They need fish. There's Chinese crew. I mean, you know the challenges. I mean, you were in the Navy, like vessels. Who owns the vessel? Who's crewing the vessel? There's all sorts of questions. And illegal fishermen tend to not want to make it known where they're from or who they're fishing for. So that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably need like more fish farm technology or something because they just the market. I mean, the demand for fish is going to.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. Do you guys do studies on this? Or no, I don't know how I got on this topic.
Yeah. I do know there's people at CNA that have worked on food security issues. I haven't personally ever done any research on that, but I do know it for China, food security is a huge concern. And that's something they are going to have to figure out how to address.
I mean, it's probably why they want all these islands and stuff. They want to like have some more zone of the fishing.
Well, there was a debate here in the U.S. with China buying up agricultural land. I mean, the state China now owns Smithfield Farms, the pork producer. So, I mean, a lot of that is food security. They want to make sure they have access to land and resources to feed their population.
Yeah, we really need some tech to like just have like a pill that feeds you so that.
But that's no fun.
I mean,
who wants to just take a pill?
Well, you still eat for like pleasure and stuff.
Okay.
But like then.
As long as I can eat for pleasure, because I do love eating. So.
But like, I don't know, it'd be funny like someone's investing in all this food security and then like it becomes irrelevant. It's a classic
technology.
Yeah, classic technology disrupting.
A whole new level.
But okay, so the fishing, overfishing. I had one more. Oh yeah, back to the last thing we gotta go back to the monks. So last thing, we gotta wrap on the monks. Okay. So Tibet obviously looks like a very harsh land. It's tough to live there. The plateau, it looks tough. In all the pictures I've seen.
High altitude, yeah. You got to be able to handle the altitude.
We were talking about the Buddhist practice, though. Like it's like you were saying, it's what was it again? Like
impermanent.
Impermanent.
There is a recognition that life in the world is always impermanent.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing. So I interpret that as you have.
Do you meditate?
I do yoga.
Okay.
I personally, going back to snowboarding, I started doing yoga after I tore my Achilles tendon, and my doctor was like, you need to do something to counterbalance all the dangerous things you do. So I do yoga, and I find that really helpful in terms of both physical and mental health. So I get that. I understand. I think what I take away from Buddhist thought, though, is I think they're right. The world is always changing. I think that brings us back to technology. You don't know what the future is going to hold. So if you cling too tightly to any one thing, you're probably going to be disappointed. So I think that is
okay.
So I can understand that part of their philosophy.
All right, that's hot. I like that. So wait, but we were talking about how they make these like sand. Pull it up, Jack. Yeah, okay, here we go. Look how elaborate this is.
Oh, that's way more elaborate than.
No, but they do it for. You didn't know about this. You didn't see this before. They do this all the time.
Not in that level of detail. I would not.
But what's crazy is
so beautiful.
And then they blow it all away. But they still spend days on this or whatever, and then they have like the kids doing it too.
Well, that's how monks get trained.
I know, it just feels like it's torture. Like the kids
for the kids.
The kids don't like this shit.
Well, I mean, sitting in a classroom where you can't move and go outside and play is also torture for kids.
That's true. That's true.
Think about how we educate, young children. I feel lucky because I grew up in the middle of nowhere and we ran around like crazy people and no one knew what we were doing most of the time. I think that's healthy.
I mean,
child.
Anyway, so they got this going on, and then I think the Chinese people, and I don't really know, but I'm assuming that they just don't like this. They're like, fuck these guys. They're like, what? No, they don't like Tibet. They don't like the monks, right?
I don't think that's true.
No?
I think for the most part, I mean, during the worst times of the Cultural Revolution, the Buddhist monasteries were attacked. Pagodas that had Buddha statues on them were destroyed. So there was a time when they were attacked. I don't think it's not like that anymore. I think most people respect them if they just want to do their own thing. I think most Chinese, though, they don't understand.
The general sentiment? That's the general sentiment?
I think most people, even in America, someone who has devoted their entire life to their religious beliefs, I think for most average people, that's kind of hard to understand. And I think that's the case in China as well.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm more enthralled by it. I'm confused. I mean, I honestly, I want to it's their culture. So I don't want to, it's what they do. But it's very interesting to me. Why are they doing this? But I guess it's just the impermanence thing. It's like a meditation.
It is a form of meditation.
Yeah. And
it's also
they just train all their people to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like that's just I think the culture clash there. I think there's got to be something with their culture clash there with them.
I mean, that I will say that and I wish I knew more about Tibetan culture writ large, but it does seem to have some very distinct elements that are different than Han Chinese culture.
Yeah, I think like pop American Buddhism's pretty good though. Like that's what I call it, like pop. No, like where it's like, so yeah, we meditate. We're cool. It's not like real Buddhists.
Yeah,
like
they're not. Yeah, I mean, I think the scientific research on meditation is fascinating because they are showing that there is some interesting connections there. So they were tapping into something that does seem to, and I haven't read it yet. It's on my reading list. There's a book that just came out called like The Lotus and something. And the Quantum, because it's about how quantum physics actually aligns with some Buddhist thinking, and like maybe they were onto something.
Oh, really?
They didn't have the scientific knowledge to understand it. That's it. Quantum and the Lotus. It's on my reading list. I just bought it the other day and I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
This sounds like some woo-woo shit.
I'm fascinated.
I'm in.
Maybe they knew something thousands of years ago that only now we're getting the scientific research to uncover. So I'm not. That's on my list.
Okay, I kind of like it. All right, the Quantum and the Lotus, where science and Buddhism meet.
Yeah, like I said, it's on my reading list. I just bought it. I haven't started it yet, though. So
I mean, yeah, I think that you're gonna get into some interesting questions about like free will and all kinds of stuff in this book. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll see.
All right, well, I think that's a great place to actually end it. That's amazing, and thank you for coming on, April.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Yeah, this is a great episode. The CNA is going to be our main guest. We're supposed to do an all CNA.
I'll keep sending you recommendations.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, we'll see ya.
All right, thanks.